You ever been fined for doing something on your own driveway? I have. And not for anything normal, no, I got fined for blocking a golf cart. Yep, that's where this story starts. My name's Brandon Miller. I'm a 39-year-old paramedic, live in a quiet neighborhood outside of Tampa. Or at least it used to be quiet until Sharon Kingsley took over the HOA board. Middle-aged, bleach blonde, always in neon tennis gear like she was 2 minutes away from a country club commercial. She drove a candy-pink golf cart around like it was a law enforcement cruiser and barked orders at anyone who dared breathe out of sync with her bylaws. Last Thursday, I came home after a double shift. I barely parked my truck in the driveway before I got a knock on the door, didn't even make it inside. It was her, Sharon. "You're obstructing HOA designated thoroughfare access," she snapped, arms crossed like she was about to arrest me. I looked at her golf cart idling halfway down the sidewalk. "What are you talking about? You parked too close to the corner. I couldn't get my cart through. That's a violation of Section 8, Paragraph 12, blocking community mobility devices." "Your cart isn't a mobility device," I said, still in my damn uniform. "And this is my driveway." She whipped out a digital camera and took a picture of my truck. "Expect a formal notice and a fine, $65, I laughed. "Big mistake." Her face turned red like a volcano about to blow. The next day, I got the fine taped to my door with second notice in red, bold letters, even though it was the first one. She'd also emailed it to the HOA listserv, publicly shaming me like I'd committed grand theft auto. So I did what any annoyed, sleep-deprived guy would do. I filed an appeal. They denied it. Of course they did. Sharon chaired the appeal committee. She cited repeated obstruction and added another fine for inappropriate conduct during HOA interaction. That's when I got serious. I pulled out the neighborhood charter, printed it front to back. I started highlighting every clause that mentioned vehicular access and personal property lines. Turns out, Sharon's golf cart isn't recognized anywhere in the HOA documents, not even in the updated 2021 revision. No mention of designated cart paths either. She made the whole thing up. But I wasn't done. I requested the HOA's financial records. They're legally required to provide them within 30 days. Sharon refused, claiming privacy regulations. That was strike two. Then I remembered something. My buddy from college, Trent, is now a real estate attorney. I gave him a call, walked him through the whole mess. He looked over everything and said, "Brandon, she's violating multiple state statutes. You've got a solid case." So I filed suit. Not just against the HOA, but against Sharon personally, for abuse of position, refusal to disclose public HOA records, and levying unauthorized fines. They laughed it off. Right up until the court summons arrived. The day the summons hit Sharon's mailbox, the whole street buzzed. Not from me, I kept quiet, but because Sharon didn't. She went door to door ranting about frivolous lawsuits and ungrateful residents undermining community order. By evening, half the cul-de-sac had heard her version. Predictably, it starred her as the heroic protector of lawn symmetry and cart lanes, and me as a rogue troublemaker trying to dismantle the neighborhood one driveway at a time. But the real story was unfolding in court. Trent filed the complaint in Hillsborough County. It spelled out everything: the unauthorized fines, the refusal to release financial records, and the deliberate misrepresentation of HOA authority. He even attached photos of the so-called blocked path. My truck parked well within my property line while her golf cart sat idling almost 10 feet away. There was no obstruction, not even close. The judge didn't toss it. He greenlit discovery. That's when things started unraveling. Trent subpoenaed the HOA's financials directly. With a court order Sharon couldn't refuse. What we got back was like Christmas morning for a legal team. Over the past 18 months, several maintenance fees had been paid to a landscaping company called Bayview Outdoor Services. Except, according to the Florida Department of State, that business had been dissolved over 2 years ago. When Trent dug deeper, He found the registered address Sharon's cousin's house in Clearwater. The payments, just under $10,000 total. We brought it to the judge during the first hearing. Sharon's attorney, a guy named Lowell who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, tried to downplay it. There's no indication of malicious intent. At worst, it's a clerical oversight. No legitimate HOA disburses thousands in fake expenses by accident, the judge replied. You'll want to take this seriously. She didn't. At least not then. That week, I installed 2 outdoor cameras, one above the garage, one facing the sidewalk. Not because I expected trouble, but because Sharon had started making weird comments to neighbors. Things like, some folks might regret kicking the hornet's nest, and if someone's truck were to suddenly get keyed, well, accidents happen. I wasn't about to give her the chance. Sure enough, 3 nights later, around 2 in the morning, the footage caught a shadowy figure creeping down my driveway. They didn't touch my truck, but they planted one of those tiny orange flags, the kind utility companies used to mark gas lines, right at the edge of my lawn. I checked with the city. No work orders, no inspections. Sharon was trying to fake a code violation. I sent the footage to Trent. He forwarded it to the county clerk and added it to the case file. At the next court date, Sharon didn't show. Lowell stood in her place, looking like he'd just eaten a lemon. Your Honor, he said, Miss Kingsley has taken ill and requests a continuance. She was seen jogging yesterday morning, I said. 3 residents saw her pass their houses. The judge raised an eyebrow. Very well. We'll proceed. Trent rolled out the footage, then the fake landscaping payments, then the email exchange where Sharon denied access to the HOA records against Florida Statute 720.303. The judge didn't say much. He just nodded, made notes, and then looked up. Defendant is hereby ordered to reimburse the plaintiff's legal fees in full. Additionally, the HOA must undergo an independent audit within 30 days at their own expense. By the time we stepped out of the courtroom, Sharon's empire had started to crack, but it didn't end there. The audit performed by a third-party firm out of Orlando uncovered something worse. $2,000 had been spent on community event supplies that were actually receipts from a boutique wine store and a spa in Sarasota. The purchases had been made using the HOA debit card issued solely to Sharon. Now it wasn't just civil, it was criminal. The audit firm flagged the expenses and forwarded them to the state attorney's office. Within a week, Sharon was served again, this time by law enforcement, on charges of misappropriation of funds and falsifying financial reports for a nonprofit organization. Because Florida classifies HOAs as not-for-profit corporations, her actions fell under strict fraud statutes. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. Neighbors started talking in whispers. The same ones who used to nod politely when she passed in her golf cart were now crossing the street to avoid her. Someone even left a copy of the audit summary taped to the HOA bulletin board with accountability written across the top in red Sharpie. At the emergency board meeting, Sharon tried to play the victim. These accusations are politically motivated, she said, voice shaking. I've served this community for years. You served yourself, said Mr. Alvarez, a retired firefighter who never spoke much before, and you made everyone else pay for it. A motion was made to remove her as president. It passed unanimously. She tried to object, but the HOA bylaws finally read aloud by someone other than her were clear. Any board member under criminal investigation could be suspended pending resolution. Sharon was escorted out by the vice president, a quiet woman named Letta who'd once been threatened with a citation for having a wind chime. After that, things changed fast. The interim board refunded every fine Sharon had issued without proper review. My $65 came back with a formal apology. They also voted to ban golf carts from sidewalks unless medically necessary, citing safety concerns. Sharon's pink cart? It vanished from the streets within days. As for the lawsuit, Trent filed a motion to collect damages. The judge awarded just under $10,000 in legal fees. Sharon had to pay it personally. No HOA funds, no reimbursement, straight from her pocket. The best part, the check arrived certified mail, signed in her own handwriting. Trent framed the envelope and gave it to me as a gift. "You ever want to hang it above the fireplace," he said, "just let me know." I didn't. But I did keep it in my desk drawer as a reminder that bullies with bylaws are still just bullies and that sometimes the law bites back harder. 2 weeks after Sharon was removed from the board, I thought things might finally settle down. The neighborhood was quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. No typed notices taped to doors. No random fines showing up in mailboxes. The golf cart routes were gone, the board was reorganizing, and I had finally gotten a full night's sleep. But then Detective Ramirez from the county's Economic Crimes Unit showed up at my door. He was in plain-clothes dark jeans, button-up, badge clipped to his belt. Said he was following up on the audit that had uncovered Sharon's spending. "We're expanding the investigation," he explained, flipping open a small notepad. "There might be more than just misappropriated funds." "Your lawyer mentioned something about obstructed access to HOA records." "Yeah," I said, stepping aside so he could come in. "She refused repeated requests, said privacy laws prevented it." He wrote something down. "That's not how nonprofit transparency laws work." He asked to see any emails I still had, so I pulled up the chain on my laptop. There were over 20 messages, all increasingly dismissive, some even threatening legal retaliation for continued harassment. Ramirez read each one carefully, nodding slightly. "Here's the thing," he said, closing the laptop. "We've been talking to some of the vendors listed in the HOA's budget. Several of them never received the payments they were marked for. One of the biggest ones, a paving company, Go Line Asphalt," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You've heard of them." She used them as the reason for a special assessment last year. Said they were repaving the walking path behind the clubhouse. "They weren't. They never secured any contract with your HOA. We called them and they confirmed they hadn't done work in your neighborhood at all." "So where'd the money go?" "That's what we're going to find out." "But we're past the civil stage now. This is official fraud, possibly mail fraud too, depending on how she processed those fines. The DA's office is watching this closely." He left after taking a copy of the emails and a statement from me. I called Trent right after. He wasn't surprised. "She got greedy," he said. "These kinds of people always do. They start with control, then realize they can skim without anyone noticing, and once they get away with it once, they keep going." That's what happened. That weekend, I saw 2 unmarked sedans parked outside Sharon's house. She didn't come out, but word spread quick. Letta, the interim board president, confirmed at the next community meeting that the HOA was now cooperating with a formal investigation into misappropriation of community funds and fraudulent vendor relations. What no one expected was what happened next. One of the former board members, Bill Harkness, guy with a limp and a background in construction, stood up and asked to speak. "I was on the finance committee," he said, voice tight. "Sharon wouldn't let us see the books. She claimed it was all handled at the executive level. I didn't push back hard enough. I regret that." Nobody interrupted. He kept going. "She used my signature to approve payments I never saw. One was for a playground maintenance project that never happened. She forged it. I just found out last week when I got a call from someone with the DA's office. They're treating me like a suspect." He held up a thick envelope. "So I made copies. Every email, every document I could find. If I go down, I'm not going alone." That envelope changed everything. The documents showed that Sharon had been funneling funds into multiple shell companies, each registered under different names, but all traced back to a P.O. box in Pasco County. One of them, Lakeside Green Services, had received over $7,000 to install drought-resistant flora along the main entrance. No such plants ever appeared. The board voted to suspend all spending until the forensic audit was complete. Meanwhile, the DA issued a warrant for Sharon's arrest. I saw it happen from my driveway. 2 deputies knocked on her door just after 7 in the morning. She answered in a robe, eyes wide. She tried to argue, but they read her the warrant and cuffed her right there on her front steps. Someone down the street took a video. It made the rounds within an hour. The charges were serious: fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and obstruction. The DA's office mentioned the figure during the press conference: just under $32,000 in misused HOA funds. Letta called an emergency meeting that night. After the basics were covered, she looked around the room. "This community needs to start healing," she said. "We can't fix what happened overnight, but we can make sure it never happens again." She proposed a full rewrite of the bylaws. More transparency, public access to all financial records, mandatory term limits for board members, and maybe most importantly, a rule that no one person could control more than one committee. I stood in the back, arms crossed, listening as real people, not just the loud ones, started volunteering to help. A retired CPA offered to chair the finance committee. A schoolteacher down the block suggested a neighborhood newsletter to keep everyone informed. Even Bill Harkness raised his hand to help rebuild trust. No one mentioned Sharon. By the end of the meeting, the board had approved the first draft of the new rules. They also passed a motion to redirect all remaining discretionary funds toward community improvements chosen by resident vote. For the first time in months, people left smiling. A week later, I got a certified letter from the county clerk. It was the official notice that Sharon had entered a plea deal, guilty on 2 of the charges in exchange for reduced sentencing and full restitution. She'd agreed to pay back every dollar she stole, plus fines. She also accepted a 5-year ban from serving on the board of any nonprofit organization in the state. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Didn't need to. The neighborhood had already moved on. Some people planted flower beds. Others painted their shutters in colors that Sharon would have fined them for. The sidewalks were clear, but for the first time they didn't feel like territory to be policed. They just felt like home. One afternoon, I saw Letta walking the block with a clipboard. "Taking a survey," she said. "Trying to figure out what people want to do with the extra funds from the canceled landscaping contracts. Got any ideas?" "Yeah," I said. "Put up a community board by the mailboxes, somewhere people can post things. Lost pets, local gigs, something real." She smiled. "I like that." I went back inside and closed the door behind me, the quiet finally feeling earned. The security cameras were still up, but now they felt like insurance, not defense. Sharon's pink golf cart was eventually sold at auction. I heard a college kid from Clearwater bought it and turned it into a beach cruiser. Fitting end, I thought. The framed envelope from her restitution check still sits in my drawer. Not because I need a trophy, but because sometimes the only way to restore order is to expose the ones who abused it. And maybe, just maybe, next time someone tries to run a neighborhood like a dictatorship, they'll think twice. Especially if there's a paramedic with a good lawyer living next door. A month after Sharon's arrest, the neighborhood looked different, not just physically, but in the way people carried themselves. Driveways were finally being resealed, porches repainted without whispers of non-compliance, and families who'd kept to themselves were now waving across the street. The HOA had appointed a new permanent board, and transparency meetings were scheduled every 3rd Saturday with open attendance and recorded minutes. But the true storm hadn't finished passing. One afternoon, I got a call from Trent while I was restocking medical supplies at the station. He was direct. "The state's attorney wants your testimony added to the grand jury package," he said. "They're pushing for a 2nd round of charges." I paused mid-label. "Second round, they found something else." Sharon didn't just misuse the HOA funds, she submitted falsified insurance claims on behalf of the association. Claimed storm damage repairs that never happened, collected nearly $12 grand in payouts over 2 years. "Insurance fraud?" I asked. "Yep, felony level." They're digging into affidavits now, and some of them have your name listed as a supposed witness to damaged property inspections. I leaned against the counter, trying to process it. She forged my name. Looks that way. You'll need to confirm it under oath. They're assembling everything to hand off to a federal task force. It crosses state lines. Some of the payout checks were routed through a third-party claims adjuster out of Georgia. That week, I drove to the county courthouse and gave my statement under penalty of perjury. The investigator, a calm man with wire-rimmed glasses and a deadpan voice, showed me the documents. There it was in black ink, my name and a crude imitation of my signature at the bottom of a property damage assessment. "It's not even close," I said, pointing at it. "I sign my B with a loop." "That's just a straight line." The investigator nodded slowly and made a note. "We've confirmed at least 5 residents whose signatures were forged, all tied to the same set of claims." "So what happens now?" He closed the folder. "We're handing it off to the U.S. Attorney's Office." Wire fraud and insurance fraud across state lines, it's federal now. By the time the charges were filed, Sharon had already posted bail for her state-level offenses, but this new development changed everything. 2 agents from the Department of Justice showed up with a federal indictment. It made the local news. Sharon's mugshot, now accompanied by a second set of charges, was plastered across the evening broadcast. The anchor called it a stunning fall from power for a once-feared HOA president. Residents started coming forward with their own stories, things they hadn't spoken up about until now. One man admitted he'd been pressured into writing a donation check for a community beautification project, only to find out the money went towards Sharon's personal home renovation. A single mother revealed that Sharon had threatened to report her to child services over a toy left in the yard, unless she volunteered to clean the clubhouse every weekend. Every new story made it easier for people to come together. The HOA board voted to establish a resident-led oversight committee with rotating members and no re-elections allowed within 2 years of serving. They called it the Neighborhood Ethics Panel. Meanwhile, Sharon's house sat untouched. No cars in the driveway, no motion in the windows. The pink shutters, once her signature touch, had begun to fade. Someone left a note taped to her front door that simply read, "You don't live here anymore." The final hearing in the civil suit came shortly after. I sat in the gallery beside Trent as the judge reviewed the restitution agreement. Sharon, represented by a new attorney, didn't say a word. She looked thinner, older. The lawyer asked for leniency in repayment terms, citing unexpected financial strain. The judge didn't budge. "You used your position to exploit your neighbors and then attempted to cover it with forgery and fraud. You will repay every cent, no exceptions." She was ordered to liquidate assets to meet the payments. Her car, her furniture, even her golf cart had already been sold. The restitution fund was split among the residents affected by illegitimate fines, misused assessments, and forged claims. I received an additional settlement compensation for defamation and unlawful targeting, but it wasn't the money that mattered. Later that month, the neighborhood hosted its first community dinner in the park. No board approvals, no permits required, just folding tables, shared dishes, and music from an old Bluetooth speaker. I brought a crock pot of pulled pork and a cooler of sodas. People I barely knew came up and introduced themselves, some with handshakes, others with quiet nods that said more than words. Letta approached me as the sun started to dip behind the tree line. She was wearing jeans and a faded Gators hoodie, clipboard nowhere in sight. "You know," she said, opening a folding chair beside me, "we used to be afraid to do this. Remember when Sharon fined the Thompsons for having a birthday party on their lawn?" I chuckled, "and claimed it was an unauthorized public gathering." "Yeah, I remember." "Well, now we've got a new rule. If 3 or more people are smiling in one place, it's officially encouraged." We sat in silence for a moment, watching kids race around the playground that had finally been repaired properly this time, with funds voted on by residents. The new picnic tables had been donated by a local carpenter who refused reimbursement. "No more golf cart patrols," I said. "No more fake landscaping invoices. No more bloated power trips." She glanced at me. "You ever think about running for the board?" I shook my head. "I'm better as a watchdog." "Good," she said. "We need those too." The music shifted tracks. Someone started handing out sparklers. The air smelled like barbecue and fresh-cut grass. And for the first time since moving into the neighborhood, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The last thing I did before heading home was walk past Sharon's old house. Her name had already been removed from the mailbox. A "for sale by owner" sign leaned crookedly in the yard, half covered in overgrown weeds. I didn't stop. Just kept walking, hands in my pockets, the faint sound of laughter floating on the breeze behind me. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been reclaimed by the people who lived here, who finally realized that no one gets to rule a neighborhood like a kingdom. And no one gets away with using a golf cart like a scepter.